I sat on the edge of my hospital bed, still in my military fatigues, the letter from my grandfather's attorney trembling in my hand. The inheritance I'd been counting on, all $780,000 of it, had been redistributed while I was deployed overseas. My parents had somehow gained access to the funds and drained the account to almost nothing. I stared at the bank statement, my vision blurring, my heart hammering against my ribs. The funds that were meant to start my civilian life, to pay for. The surgeries my military insurance wouldn't fully cover had vanished. That didn't make sense. My grandfather had been explicit in his will. The money was mine. Compensation for the years I'd spent caring for him before I enlisted, for the weekends I'd driven 4 hours to his farmhouse to repair the roof, fix the plumbing, and make sure he was eating properly. He'd been so proud when I joined the Army, but worried about my future. The military chews people up and spits them out, he'd warned me. This money is your safety net when you come home. And now it was gone. I scrolled through the bank app, thinking there must be some mistake. Maybe the executor had sent the wrong statement. Maybe the funds had been moved to a different account for security reasons. But as I studied the transaction history, my stomach dropped. A series of large withdrawals over the past 8 months, all authorized with the power of attorney I'd granted my parents before my last deployment to Afghanistan. My leg, the one with the pins and rods from the IED blast, started to throb as I pushed myself up from the bed. I grabbed my crutch and limped toward the nurse's station to use the phone. My cell service had been shut off right after I landed stateside. Another detail I'd have to sort out. I still couldn't believe this was happening. I'd just spent 14 months in a combat zone, lost 3 friends from my unit, and nearly lost my own leg. And now this? Mom, I said when she finally answered, my voice barely steady. What happened to Grandpa's inheritance? There was a pause, too long to be innocent. I could hear music in the background, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Some kind of celebration. Oh, Ellie, we've been trying to reach you, she said, her voice artificially bright. We had to make some financial decisions while you were away. Your sister's wedding is next weekend. We thought you'd be back in time. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. The venue alone. My inheritance, I interrupted, the words like glass in my throat. The money Grandpa left me. Where is it? Another pause. I could almost see her exchanging glances with my father, the two of them silently deciding on a story. Well, we had to use some of it for the wedding, she finally admitted. And the house needed a new roof. And your father's business had a temporary cash flow issue. But don't worry, once Jessica and Brad get back from their honeymoon in Bali, they're going to start paying it back. It all stays in the family, right? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. That money was for my surgeries, for a place to live when I got out. Grandpa left it to me specifically because he knew what I'd be facing when I came home. Oh, honey, my mother sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. You've always been so dramatic about money. The VA takes care of all that medical stuff, doesn't it? Besides, your sister needed this. You know how important appearances are in Brad's family. His parents were going to pay, but then his father had that scandal at his firm, and we couldn't let Jessica have anything less than perfection. I stood there, leaning on my crutch in a VA hospital hallway, trying to process what I was hearing. My parents had stolen my future to fund my sister's Instagram-perfect wedding. The sister who had visited me exactly 0 times during my 3 previous hospital stays. The sister who had texted me exactly twice during my last deployment. Once, to ask if I could send her some cheap foreign jewelry, and once to announce her engagement. You're coming home tomorrow, right? Mom continued, oblivious to my silence. Jessica wants you to try on your bridesmaid dress. We had to guess on the size, and with your injury, we're not sure how it will fit. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. How much is left? I asked. What? Of my inheritance. How much is left? Another pause. About 12,000, she said quickly. But don't worry, that's plenty to get you started. You can stay in your old room until you figure things out. $12,000 from $780,000. The room seemed to tilt around me. That wouldn't cover even the first of the 3 surgeries I needed. It wouldn't even cover a rental deposit and first month's rent in most places. Ellie, are you still there? Look, I've got to run. The florist is having a crisis with the centerpieces. We'll talk when you get home. The line went dead. I handed the phone back to the nurse, who was pretending not to have overheard, but gave me a sympathetic look anyway. Everything okay, Sergeant Mitchell? She asked. No, nothing was okay. I'd spent 4 years in the Army, 14 months in a war zone, lost part of my mobility to an IED, and come home to discover my own parents had robbed me blind to throw a wedding that cost more than most people's homes. Fine, I managed to say, then limped back to my room. I sat on the bed, staring at the worn linoleum floor. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute that I couldn't even cry. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was theft, plain and simple, and not just of money, but of my future, my security, my chance to rebuild my life after everything I'd sacrificed. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jessica. OMG, can't wait to see you. The bridesmaids' dresses are gorgeous, rose gold sequins. Dad says you're being weird about the dollar stuff, but seriously, we're family. It all works out. In the end, BTW, can you wear heels with your situation? Aesthetic is important. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. 4 years ago, I'd left for basic training 2 days after my grandfather's funeral. My sister had been too busy with college, sorority events to attend either my graduation or his funeral. My parents had come to my graduation but left early to attend one of my sister's award ceremonies. I'd always been the afterthought in my family. The practical one, the responsible, the one who would understand when plans changed to accommodate Jessica's needs and wants. When I announced I was joining the Army, my mother had cried, not with pride, but with disappointment that I wasn't pursuing something more ladylike. My father had checked his watch repeatedly during my swearing-in ceremony, anxious to get back for some business dinner. Meanwhile, Jessica's every achievement, her dance recitals, her college acceptance, her engagement to Brad Whitmore of the Connecticut Whitmores, was celebrated with professional photography and catered parties. I had made my peace with it. Or I thought I had, until this moment, when I realized they hadn't just neglected me, they had actively harmed me. They had taken what was rightfully mine, what my grandfather had specifically left to protect me, and used it to buy Jessica another moment in the spotlight. The rage that rose up in me then was like nothing I'd ever felt before. Not in combat. Not during my grueling physical therapy sessions, not even when I'd received the news that half my squad had been killed in an ambush. This was a cold, precise fury that cleared my head and steadied my hands. I reached for my laptop and powered it up. Before I'd deployed, before I'd trusted my parents with power of attorney, I'd made copies of all my important documents. Somewhere, in my email was a copy of my grandfather's will, along with all the communication I'd had with his attorney. I needed to know exactly what had happened and what, if anything, I could do about it. As I searched through my emails, another text from my mother arrived. Forgot to mention, we've set up a little welcome home gathering tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. Everyone's dying to hear your war stories. But maybe don't mention the injury too much. Jessica doesn't want anything depressing right before the wedding. I didn't respond. I was too busy reading the attachment I'd just found. It was a copy of the deed to my parents' house. The house they'd lived in for 20 years, the house I'd grown up in. The house that, according to this document, had been transferred to my name 5 years ago when my grandfather had paid off their mortgage to save them from foreclosure. The house that, legally, belonged to me. I sat back, a strange calm washing, over me. All these years, I'd believed my parents when they talked about their mortgage payments, their financial struggles, their sacrifices to maintain the family home. All these years, they'd been living in a house that was mine, that had been given to me by my grandfather, who had seen, long before I did, exactly what kind of people they were. For the first time since I'd opened that letter from the attorney, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just found a weapon. My parents had stolen my inheritance, but they'd forgotten about the roof over their heads. The roof that, technically, I owned. The roof under which they were about to host my sister's extravagant rehearsal dinner, welcome home party, and pre-wedding brunch. I picked up my phone and composed a simple text to my mother. Looking forward to coming home tomorrow. By the way, how much do you think the house is worth these days? Just curious. Then I began to plan. The taxi pulled up to my parents' colonial-style house in the suburbs of Columbus, and for a moment, I just sat there, staring through the window. The manicured lawn was dotted with white tents being erected by a professional crew. Workers carried boxes of flowers, lighting equipment, and what appeared to be ice sculptures toward the backyard, all paid for with my money, my future. "This the right place, ma'am?" the driver asked, glancing back at me. I nodded, my throat tight, and handed him the fare, plus a generous tip, one of the few luxuries I could still afford. As I struggled out of the car with my crutch and duffel bag, I noticed my mother rushing down the front steps. She was perfectly put together as always. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, freshly highlighted hair. The picture of suburban success. "Ellie! Oh my goodness, let me help you!" She reached for my bag with one hand while air-kissing my cheek with practiced precision. "We weren't expecting you for another hour. The welcome banners aren't even up yet." I didn't respond, just focused on making it up the steps without stumbling. My leg was throbbing from the flight, and the medication I'd been prescribed at the VA hospital was still in my bag. I hadn't wanted to take it before traveling alone. "Your father's at the office, but he'll be home for dinner. And Jessica's getting her final dress fitting with the bridesmaids. She's so disappointed you couldn't make the previous fittings, but I'm sure we can make it work." She was chattering away, guiding me through the front door of the house. My house, technically. Inside, the home I'd grown up in had been transformed. New furniture, new artwork, fresh paint, crystal vases filled with expensive flower arrangements dotted every surface. It looked like a spread from Architectural Digest. It looked like $780,000 of renovations. "We did a little updating," my mother said, catching my stare. "What do you think? The interior designer works with all the best families in the area. She did the Whitmore's summer home, too." I set my bag down carefully. "It's different." Well, with Jessica marrying into the Whitmore family, we needed to make sure our home reflected our standing. First impressions are everything. You understand. I didn't. I couldn't understand spending that kind of money on appearances while your daughter was in a war zone, potentially never coming home. I couldn't understand stealing from one child to elevate another. "I need to take my meds," I said, cutting her off mid-description of the imported Italian marble in the renovated foyer, "and maybe lie down for a bit. The flight was rough." "Oh, yes, of course. We've kept your old room." She trailed off, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. "Actually, we converted your bedroom into Jessica's bridal suite for the wedding weekend. Her dress needs its own space, and with all her bridesmaids coming to get ready." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "So where am I sleeping?" "We've made up the den so nicely. It's very cozy. Your father bought a new pull-out sofa last month, top of the line." She was walking quickly now, leading me through the kitchen, also completely renovated with professional-grade appliances and granite countertops, to the small den off the back of the house. The den had indeed been made up with fresh bedding on the pull-out sofa, but the room was clearly being used as storage for wedding supplies. Boxes of party favors, stacks of program booklets, and several bridesmaid gift bags crowded the space. A banner reading "Jessica and Brad Forever" was draped across one wall. "It's just for a few days," my mother said defensively, catching my expression. "After the wedding, we'll sort out something more permanent, if you still need a place to stay. If I still need a place." As if my medical discharge and rehabilitation were some sort of choice, like a gap year or spiritual retreat. "I'll manage," I said, my voice flat. I needed to be alone, to process what I was seeing, to plan my next steps without my mother watching my every reaction. "Great. I'll let you get settled then. Dinner's at 7. The caterers are doing a test run for the rehearsal dinner menu, so we'll have quite a feast." She hesitated at the door. "It's good to have you home, Ellie, really." After she left, I sank onto the edge of the sofa bed and buried my face in my hands. This was worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd erased me from the family home entirely. My bedroom converted to storage for Jessica's wedding dress. My inheritance transformed into Italian marble and professional landscaping. My sacrifice reduced to an inconvenient homecoming that disrupted their wedding preparations. I dug through my duffel for my medication and swallowed a pill dry. Then I pulled out my laptop and opened the file containing my grandfather's will and the property deed again. I needed to be absolutely certain before I made my next move. The legal language was dense, but the facts were clear. 5 years ago, my grandfather had purchased my parents' house outright when they were facing foreclosure. Instead of giving it directly to them, he had put it in my name, with the provision that my parents could live in it for as long as they needed. There were no conditions, no restrictions on my ownership. The house, currently valued at just over $850,000 according to a quick online search, was mine. I wondered if they even remembered this detail. Had they been so focused on accessing my liquid inheritance that they'd forgotten about the property? Or did they simply assume I'd never find out, never check, never stand up for myself? As I pondered this, the front door opened, and I heard voices, high, excited, female voices. Jessica and her friends back from the dress fitting, I guessed. I wasn't ready to face them yet, but the house wasn't that big, and the den didn't have a proper door, just a sliding partition that was currently half open. "Mom, the alterations are perfect." Kimmy almost cried when she saw me in it. My sister's voice, as familiar as it was grating. "I did cry," another voice chimed in. "She looks like an actual princess." "Brad's jaw is going to hit the floor," a third voice added. "Speaking of which, how's the honeymoon planning going? Still the overwater bungalow in Bali?" I could hear them moving into the kitchen, the clinking of glasses, the pop of a champagne cork. Celebrating. With my money. 2 weeks in paradise, Jessica sighed happily. First class all the way. Brad wanted to do economy plus and save for a house down payment, but I told him you only get one honeymoon. And besides, Dad said not to worry about the money right now. I flinched at that. Not to worry about the money. My money. "Is that your sister's bag?" one of the friends asked, her voice dropping slightly. "Is she here already?" "Ugh, I guess so," Jessica replied, not bothering to lower her voice at all. "Mom said she's been super weird about the wedding expenses. Like, I get that she's had a rough time or whatever, but it's my wedding. Once in a lifetime." I'd heard enough. I stood up, grabbed my crutch, and made my way to the kitchen. The conversation stopped abruptly as I appeared in the doorway. 4 women in coordinating pastel sundresses stared at me like I was an apparition, or an inconvenience. Jessica recovered first, setting down her champagne flute and rushing toward me for an awkward hug that smelled of expensive perfume and insecurity. "Ellie, oh my God, you're here! Everyone, this is my sister, the war hero!" She stepped back, gesturing dramatically toward me, but careful not to actually provide any physical support, despite my obvious struggle with the crutch. "Sergeant Eleanor Mitchell," I corrected quietly. 4th Infantry Division. Right. Jessica waved this away. These are my bridesmaids. Kimmy, you remember from high school? And Tasha and Denise from college. Girls, this is Ellie. They murmured hellos, their eyes darting to my leg, then quickly away. I could read the discomfort on their faces, the relief that my situation wasn't their problem. Nice to meet you all, I said with military politeness. I hear the dress. Fitting went well. It was magical, Jessica gushed, immediately refocused on her favorite subject. The designer added these crystal embellishments along the train that catch the light when I move. It's literally breathtaking. Sounds expensive, I said mildly. A flicker of annoyance crossed Jessica's face. Well, it's not like I'm going to get married again. This is my one special day. One special day that cost more than my entire 4 years of military service had earned me. One special day that had consumed the security my grandfather had tried to provide for me. I'm going to lie down for a bit, I said, not wanting to get into it right then, not with an audience. Nice to meet you all. As I turned to leave, Jessica called after me. Oh, Ellie, your bridesmaid dress is hanging in the guest bathroom. Can you try it on before dinner? The seamstress needs to know if she needs to make any accommodations. For your medical equipment. My medical equipment. My crutch. The metal pins and rods holding my shattered leg together. I'll see what I can do, I replied, not turning around, not letting her see my face. Back in the den, I closed the partition as much as possible and lay down on the pull-out sofa. The sounds of laughter and celebration continued from the kitchen, the occasional mention of my name floating through, always followed by hushed tones and then more laughter. I stared at the ceiling, at the banner proclaiming my sister's eternal love, at the boxes of expensive party favors that had eaten away, at my future. The disbelief was giving way to something harder, colder. Certainty. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication during my deployment. This was deliberate. They had seen an opportunity while I was thousands of miles away, fighting for my life, and they had taken it without hesitation. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd found during my research earlier that day. Law Offices of Bennett and Associates, a professional voice answered. Yes, hello, I said quietly. My name is Ellie Mitchell. I need to speak with someone about asserting my property rights, today, if possible. As I set up the appointment, I could hear my sister's voice rising in excitement from the kitchen, describing some aspect of her wedding in vivid detail. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. And for the first time since I'd opened that letter in the hospital, I felt something like power returning to me. The following morning, I woke before dawn, my body still on military time despite my exhaustion. The pull-out sofa had been as uncomfortable as it looked, and my leg throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. I took my medication with a sip from the water bottle I'd placed beside the bed, then lay still, waiting for the pain to subside enough for me to get up. The house was quiet. The caterers and decorators wouldn't arrive for several more hours. For now, I had a rare moment of peace to think, to remember, to connect the dots of my family's behavior over the years. As I stared at the ceiling, memories started to surface. Moments I'd dismissed at the time, excused away, or simply absorbed, as normal. But strung together, they formed a pattern so clear and damning it took my breath away. I was 10 when I won the state science fair. My project on soil erosion had earned me a $500 scholarship and a feature in the local newspaper. The morning. The article was published. I'd rushed downstairs, excited to see it. But my parents were focused on Jessica's dance recital that evening. They hadn't bought a copy of the paper. When I showed them the online version on our family computer, my father had glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Ellie, but we need to focus on getting your sister ready for tonight. She's very nervous." I was 16 when I was accepted to a prestigious summer engineering program at MIT. the acceptance came with a partial scholarship, but we still needed to cover $3,000 for room and board. We just don't have it in the budget right now, my mother had explained apologetically. 2 weeks later, they spent $5,000 on Jessica's Sweet 16 party, complete with a live band and professionally catered food. I was 18 when I got the acceptance letter from Caltech. It came with a substantial scholarship, but not a full ride. My parents sat me down in the living room, their expressions serious. "We're so proud of you," my mother began. "But we've been setting aside money for college for years, and with Jessica's dance academy expenses and the cost of her college visits, we just don't have enough for Caltech. The state university has offered you a full scholarship. That makes more financial sense." I remembered the sick feeling in my stomach, the sense that something wasn't adding up. But I'd nodded and accepted their explanation. I was the practical one, after all. The responsible one. Then came my grandfather's illness during my sophomore year of college. I'd drop by his house between classes, cooking meals he could reheat, driving him to doctor's appointments, eventually moving in with him when his health declined further. My parents and Jessica visited occasionally, usually for less than an hour, always with excuses about busy schedules and important events. "You're the only one who really sees me," my grandfather had told me one evening as I helped him with his medication. "The others just see what they can get." I hadn't fully understood what he meant at the time. Now, lying in the den of the house he'd purchased for me, I finally did. After his funeral, when the will was read and my substantial inheritance was revealed, my parents had seemed surprised but not upset. "He always did favor you," my mother had remarked without rancor. "But family is family. It all works out in the end." I'd thought she meant that despite the unequal inheritance, we were still a unit, still supporting each other through life's challenges. Now I recognized the statement for what it was. A justification for what they'd already planned to do. When I announced my decision to join the Army, their disappointment had been palpable. "What about all that money your grandfather left you?" my father had asked. "You could start a business, buy a house, do anything." "The money is for later," I had explained. "I want to serve first, give something back." Their exchange of glances had puzzled me then. Now it made perfect sense. They had been counting on access to that money, and my decision to enlist had thrown a wrench in their plans. Still, they'd adjusted. When I was deployed, they'd need someone to manage my affairs. And who better than family? I'd trusted them completely when I signed the power of attorney. I'd believed their assurances that everything would be handled responsibly in my absence. What a fool I'd been. A door closed somewhere in the house, jolting me from my memories. I checked the time, 6:30 a.m. Someone else was up early. I quickly pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, straightened the sofa bed as best I could, and grabbed my crutch. If it was my father, I wanted to speak with him alone, before the house filled with caterers and wedding planners and my sister's endless entourage. I made my way to the kitchen quietly, the hardwood floors cool beneath my bare feet. My father stood at the coffee maker still in his bathrobe, his back to me. He'd aged during my deployment, more gray in his hair, a slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. For a moment, I felt a pang of the old affection, the desire to please him that had driven so many of my choices. Then he turned and saw me, and his expression, a flash of annoyance quickly masked by false cheer, killed that feeling instantly. "Ellie, you're up early. Military habits die hard, I guess." He gestured to the coffee maker. "Just brewing a pot. You want some?" "Sure," I said, lowering myself carefully onto one of the kitchen stools. "I could use the caffeine." He busied himself. With mugs and sugar, his movements precise and controlled. My father had always been the calm one, the practical counterpart to my mother's more emotional nature. A successful accountant with his own small firm, he prided himself on his financial acumen and ethical business practices. At least, that's what he projected to the world. "Your mother tells me you have questions about the inheritance," he said finally, setting a mug of coffee in front of me. "I understand you're upset, but you have to look at the bigger picture here." "Which is what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He sighed, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Family, Ellie. Supporting each other. You've always been the independent one, the one who could take care of herself. Jessica's different. She needs more support, more guidance. This wedding, her future with Brad, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her. And my future, my medical needs, the security Grandpa explicitly wanted me to have?" He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "We didn't know you'd be injured. When we made the decisions about the money, you were fine. And the VA covers your medical care, doesn't it? Not all of it. Not the specialized surgeries I need. Not the long-term physical therapy. Not the housing modifications I might need depending on how the next operation goes." I took a sip of coffee to steady my voice. Grandpa left me that money because he knew the military didn't pay well, because he wanted me to have options when I got out. He was trying to protect me. "And we're trying to protect Jessica," my father countered, his expression hardening. "Brad's family has expectations. This marriage connects her to opportunities she'd never have otherwise. If the wedding isn't up to their standards, if our family doesn't present a certain image—" "So my future was sacrificed for appearances?" I interrupted. "For Jessica to impress her fiancé's rich family? Don't be melodramatic. You still have options. You can stay here as long as you need to. Your military benefits are nowhere near what I need to rebuild my life." I set down my mug with deliberate care. "Dad, you're an accountant. You know exactly what you've done. You've taken my safety net, my entire financial future, and spent it on one day of celebration for my sister. How is that justifiable by any measure?" He looked away, a muscle working in his jaw. "It's done now. The money's spent. Arguing about it won't change anything. The best thing you can do is accept the situation and focus on moving forward. Be happy for your sister. Don't ruin her special time with this negativity." There it was again. The familiar refrain. Don't make waves. Don't express needs. Don't expect fairness or accountability. Just accept, accommodate, adjust. Be the bigger person. Always. "I have an appointment this morning," I said, changing the subject abruptly. "Will you be around later? We need to discuss the house." "The house?" He looked confused. "What about it?" "Just some questions about the property. Legal stuff." I kept my tone casual. "Since I'm trying to figure out my living situation going forward, I'll be in and out all day. Wedding errands. But we can talk tonight, I suppose?" He glanced at his watch. "I need to get ready. I have a breakfast meeting with Brad's father to go over some final financial arrangements for the wedding. More of my money being parceled out, no doubt." I nodded and remained at the counter as he left the kitchen. Once I heard his footsteps on the stairs, I pulled out my phone and checked my email. The attorney I'd contacted yesterday had sent confirmation of our 9:00 a.m. appointment, along with a list of documents to bring. I had most of them already, but I'd need to print a few things before I left. I opened my laptop on the kitchen counter and navigated to my email. As I was setting up the printer connection, a notification popped up. An email from the executor of my grandfather's estate, responding to my inquiry from the previous day. I opened it immediately. The response was detailed and damning. Yes, the executor confirmed. My parents had presented the power of attorney and requested access to the inheritance funds for urgent family medical expenses. Given the legitimate documentation and the seemingly pressing need, the executor had released the funds as requested. He'd attempted to contact me directly via my military email to confirm, but, as I suspected, had received responses from my family representative stating that I was in a remote location with limited communication abilities. The deception had been thorough and deliberate. They hadn't simply taken advantage of an opportunity. They had engineered the entire situation, creating fake emergencies and intercepting communications meant for me. And then there was the house. The executor confirmed what I already knew. The property had been purchased by my grandfather and placed in my name, with my parents granted lifetime residency rights. But there was a detail I hadn't known. The arrangement included the condition that they maintain the property in good condition and not make substantial alterations without my consent. Based on what I'd seen yesterday, with the extensive renovations and landscaping changes, they had clearly violated that condition, which meant, according to the executor, I had grounds to revoke their residency rights if I chose to do so. I sat back, letting this new information sink in. The pattern was now unmistakable. My parents hadn't just made a single bad decision while I was deployed. They had been using me, counting on my compliance and sense of duty, for my entire life. The inheritance was simply the latest and most egregious example. My sister appeared in the kitchen doorway, yawning dramatically. Her silk pajamas probably cost more than my entire military-issued wardrobe. "Is there coffee?" she asked, not bothering with a greeting. "I have the final menu tasting at 10 and I barely slept. The wedding planner called at midnight with a crisis about the Dove release." I wordlessly pushed the coffee pot toward her and continued reading my email. "What are you doing up so early anyway?" she asked, pouring herself a cup. "The welcome party isn't until tonight. You should rest that leg or whatever." "I have an appointment," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Well, don't forget about the dress fitting this afternoon. The seamstress is coming here specially and she can't reschedule." Jessica leaned against the counter, studying me with narrow eyes. "Mom says you're being weird about the money stuff. It's not like you're going to be buying a mansion or anything. With your disability check, right? At least the money stayed in the family." I closed my laptop slowly and looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The entitled expression, the casual dismissal of my needs, the absolute certainty that her desires trumped my necessities. It had always been this way between us. I had always given in, stepped back, made way. Not anymore. "I'll be back for the fitting," I said, gathering my things. "And Jessica, enjoy your wedding. Really soak in every minute of it." She looked surprised, then pleased. "Thanks. I knew you'd come around. It's going to be magical." "I'm sure it will be," I agreed, making my way toward the door. A day to remember for everyone. I didn't look back as I left, but I could feel the weight of years lifting from my shoulders with each step. The pattern had been revealed, and with it, my path forward was clear. The offices of Bennett and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building, all glass and polished metal. I sat in a leather chair across from Diane Bennett, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of my drill sergeant. "Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, Sergeant Mitchell," she said, reviewing the documents I'd provided. "Your grandfather purchased your parents' home 5 years ago when they were facing foreclosure. Instead of giving it to them directly, he placed it in your name, with them having lifetime residency rights conditional on maintaining the property without major alterations. Meanwhile, he also left you a substantial cash inheritance of $780,000, which your parents accessed using power of attorney while you were deployed in Afghanistan. They've spent nearly all of it primarily on your sister's upcoming wedding and home renovations. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I replied, my hands steady on the handle of my crutch. "They left me about $12,000 out of the original amount. And you? Granted them power of attorney before your deployment?" "I did. I trusted them to handle my affairs responsibly while I was overseas." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "And you've confirmed with the executor that they claimed the funds were needed for urgent family medical expenses?" "Yes. That was A lie. No one was sick or injured except me, and they didn't spend a penny on my medical care. I see. She set down her pen and looked at me directly. Sergeant Mitchell, I want to be very clear about your options here. What your parents did with your inheritance was unethical and potentially fraudulent, particularly if they misrepresented the purpose of the withdrawals to the executor. However, pursuing criminal charges would be complicated, lengthy, and could tear your family apart irreparably. I understand that, I said quietly. I'm not looking to press charges. I just want to secure what's left of my future. That's where the house comes in, she nodded. Based on the documentation you've provided, you are indeed the legal owner of the property. Your parents' right to reside there was conditioned on maintaining the property without significant alterations without your consent. The extensive renovations they've undertaken using your inheritance funds gives you grounds to revoke their residency rights. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I already had a good idea. It means you could legally require them to vacate the property. You could sell it, live in it yourself, or rent it out at market rates if they wish to remain. The current value, based on recent comparable sales in that neighborhood, is approximately $850,000 to $900,000. Almost exactly what they'd taken from me. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. What's my first step? I asked. If you're certain this is the path you want to take, I'd recommend a formal notice of violation of terms, followed by, I'm certain, I interrupted. They stole my future. They left me with virtually nothing while spending my inheritance on crystal champagne flutes and ice sculptures. They converted my bedroom into storage for my sister's wedding dress while I was learning to walk again in a VA hospital. The lawyer's expression softened slightly. I understand your position, but I want you to be fully aware of the consequences. This will fundamentally alter your relationship with your family. I gave a short, bitter laugh. What relationship? They've shown me exactly where I stand with them. I'm just returning the favor. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Very well. I'll draft the necessary documents today. We can file them immediately if you wish, or? I prompted when she hesitated. Or we could prepare everything but wait to file until after your sister's wedding this weekend. It might be less disruptive that way. I considered this. The wedding was in 3 days. The thought of sitting through it, watching them celebrate with my money, made my stomach turn. But there was a certain poetic justice in letting them have their perfect day, only to discover afterward that it had cost them far more than they realized. Let's wait, I decided. Draft everything, but hold off on filing until Monday. As you wish. She made a note on her legal pad. I'll need your signature on several forms before you leave. And there's the matter of my retainer. I can cover that, I said, reaching for my wallet. The consultation wasn't cheap, but it was worth every penny. Will you be able to handle the filing remotely? I'm not sure how long I'll be staying in town after the wedding. Of course. Everything can be done electronically once I have your initial signatures. She paused, then added, Sergeant Mitchell, I've handled many family property disputes over the years. They're never easy, no matter how justified. Are you certain this is what you want? I thought about my parents' casual dismissal of my needs, about my sister's entitled attitude, about the years of being the responsible one who always gave way, always understood, always accommodated. I'm certain, I said firmly. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. 2 hours later, I left the lawyer's office with a folder of signed documents and a strange sense of calm. The breaking point had been reached, and I had finally chosen myself. My phone buzzed as I climbed into a taxi. A text from my mother. Where are you? The florist needs input on the welcome party arrangements, and Jessica is having a meltdown about the seating chart. Come home now. I ignored it, directing the driver to take me to the mall instead. I needed to buy something appropriate to wear to this evening's welcome party, something that would help me blend in and observe while my plan unfolded. As I moved through the crowded mall, leaning on my crutch, I found myself hyper-aware of how different I was from the carefree shoppers around me. They hadn't seen what I'd seen, hadn't lost what I'd lost. Their worlds were still intact, still predictable. In a department store, I found a simple black dress that would work for the evening. Professional, understated, unmemorable. As I was paying, the saleswoman smiled at me. "Special occasion?" she asked pleasantly. "Family gathering," I replied, not elaborating. "How nice. Family is everything, isn't it?" I forced a smile. "It certainly reveals everything." She looked confused but kept her customer service smile firmly in place as she handed me the bag. Back at the house, I found controlled chaos. Florists, caterers, and event staff bustled about, transforming the backyard into a reception venue. My mother stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, barking orders with the precision of a field commander. She spotted me as I made my way toward the house. "Where have you been? I've been calling you for hours." "I had an appointment." I kept walking, not slowing to explain. "Well, you're here now. I need you to help your sister with the welcome bags for the out-of-town guests. She's in the dining room." I paused, turning to face her. "Mom, I'm tired. My leg is killing me, and I need to rest before tonight's party." "Oh, she caught herself, glancing around at the staff. "Fine. But be ready by 6, and wear something appropriate. Brad's parents will be there, and first impressions matter." I nodded and continued into the house, passing through the transformed living room without stopping. In the den, I closed the partition and lay down on the pull-out sofa, my purchased dress still in its bag beside me. I needed to conserve my energy, physical and emotional, for what was to come. The sound of my sister's laughter filtered through the house, bright, carefree, entitled. She had no idea what was coming, and neither did my parents. I felt a momentary twinge of, not regret exactly, but awareness of the magnitude of what I was setting in motion. This would change everything. But then I thought of the callous way they'd spent my inheritance, the casual dismissal of my needs, the lifetime of being secondary to my sister's wants. The twinge faded, replaced by resolve. Sometimes bridges needed to be burned so you could no longer be expected to cross them. At exactly 6 o'clock, I emerged from the den in my new black dress, hair neatly styled, makeup carefully applied to conceal the exhaustion in my eyes. I'd taken extra pain medication to ensure I could move without wincing. Tonight was about observation, about confirming what I already knew, about reinforcing my resolve. The backyard had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. String lights hung from trees, creating a canopy of artificial stars. Round tables, draped in cream-colored linens, dotted the lawn, each centered with elaborate floral arrangements. A small stage had been set up for speeches, and a string quartet played quietly in one corner. Uniformed servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It looked magical. It looked expensive. It looked like my stolen future, transformed into ephemeral beauty. My mother spotted me and hurried over, her expression a mixture of relief and critical assessment. "You look fine," she said, adjusting my sleeve slightly. "Remember, this is Jessica's moment. Try to stay in the background, and if anyone asks about your injury, keep it brief. No war stories tonight." "Understood," I replied, my voice neutral. "Where would you like me to sit?" "Table 3 in the back. We've seated you with your cousins from Dad's side." She lowered her voice. "I've asked them to help you if you need anything. With your mobility issues." My cousins from Dad's side were teenagers, the youngest barely 16. They couldn't help themselves, let alone me. But I nodded obediently and made my way to the designated table. As the evening progressed, I watched my family perform. My father, charming and solicitous with Brad's parents, a federal judge and his socialite wife. My mother, floating from group to group, accepting compliments on the beautiful event. and Jessica, radiant in the center of it all, playing the blushing bride-to-be with practiced perfection. I sat quietly, eating little, drinking less, observing everything. The constant references to the lavish wedding plans, the casual mentions of the renovated house, the ostentatious display of wealth that wasn't truly theirs. At one point, Brad's mother made her way to my table, clearly on a mission of obligatory politeness. "Eleanor, isn't it? Jessica's sister?" Her smile was practiced, her eyes barely meeting mine. "Such a lovely event. Your parents have done a marvelous job with everything." "Thank you," I said simply. "They've certainly spared no expense." "Yes, well, a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Worth every penny, I always say." She glanced at my crutch, which I'd leaned against the table. "Jessica mentioned you were in the military. How interesting. Will you be continuing with that, or do you have other plans now?" The real question was clear. Will you be doing something more suitable for someone of our social standing? "My plans are in transition," I replied vaguely. "But I'll be focusing on property management in the near future." "How sensible," she nodded, already looking past me to more important guests. "Do enjoy the rest of your evening." As she walked away, I felt a strange sense of detachment from the entire scene. These people, this world of appearances and status, it had never been mine, even before my deployment, before my injury. I had always been the practical one, the responsible one, the one who understood value beyond surface glitter. My sister appeared at the microphone then, champagne glass in hand, her voice slightly slurred. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is just the beginning of the most amazing wedding weekend ever." She raised her glass higher. "Special thanks to my incredible parents for making all my dreams come true. I have literally the best family in the world." Everyone applauded, glasses were raised, photographs were taken. The perfect family moment, captured for posterity. Only I knew that by this time next week, that perfect family would be shattered beyond repair. The house they stood in would no longer be theirs to use freely. The facade of prosperity would crumble, revealing the rot of deceit beneath. As I watched them celebrate, something inside me hardened to diamond. The last lingering doubt, the last whisper of familial obligation, gone. In its place was clarity, cold and perfect. I smiled and raised my water glass in a silent toast to myself, to new beginnings, to justice, to finally putting myself first. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the den, waking me earlier than I would have liked after the late-night welcome party. My leg throbbed dully, a constant reminder of everything that had changed in my life. I reached for my medication and swallowed a pill with water from the bottle beside me, then lay back to wait for the pain to subside. Today was the rehearsal, dinner. Tomorrow, the wedding. Monday, everything would change. I checked my phone and found a message from my lawyer. "Documents prepared as discussed. Ready to file Monday morning. Call me if you have any questions or wish to make changes." No changes, no questions. Just the steady beat of certainty in my chest. A soft knock on the partition startled me. I hadn't expected anyone else to be up this early. "Ellie? You awake?" My father's voice, uncharacteristically tentative. "Yes," I replied, pulling myself to a sitting position. "Come in." He slid the partition open and stepped into the room, all ready, dressed in pressed khakis and a polo shirt despite the early hour. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "I thought we could talk," he said, gesturing to the edge of the pull-out sofa. "May I?" I nodded, curious despite myself. He sat, hands clasped between his knees, looking oddly uncomfortable in his own home. "You mentioned wanting to discuss the house yesterday," he began. "I've been thinking about that, and about your situation. Your mother and I realize that we've perhaps been insensitive to your needs since you've returned. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. We'd like to help you get back on your feet, he said, his tone shifting to the brisk, problem-solving voice I recognized from childhood financial discussions. Once the wedding is over and things settle down, we could convert the den into a proper bedroom for you. Maybe add a bathroom with accessibility features. We've got some equity we could tap into. Equity in whose name? I interrupted, my voice calm despite the anger flaring in my chest. He blinked, momentarily thrown. Well, the house is in our name, of course, but is it? I asked quietly. A flicker of something, confusion, then unease, crossed his face. What are you talking about, Ellie? I reached for my laptop on the side table and opened it, pulling up the property deed I'd saved. I turned the screen toward him. Grandpa didn't just pay off your mortgage 5 years ago, I said. He bought the house outright and put it in my name. You and Mom have residency rights, conditional on maintaining the property without significant alterations without my consent. Rights that, legally speaking, I can revoke. The color drained from his face as he stared at the document. That can't be right. We would have known. Would you? Did you read all the paperwork Grandpa had you sign, or were you just so relieved to avoid foreclosure that you signed whatever was put in front of you? His silence was answer enough. I've confirmed this with Grandpa's executor and with my own lawyer, I continued. This house is mine. Legally, completely. The same way my inheritance was mine before you and Mom drained it for Jessica's wedding and your renovations. He ran a hand over his face, visibly shaken. Ellie, you need to think carefully about what you're doing here. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, I said simply. Family doesn't take one child's future to fund another's party. Family doesn't convert the bedroom of their injured, deployed daughter into storage for wedding dresses. We made mistakes, he admitted, his voice strained. But this would destroy your mother. And Jessica's wedding will proceed exactly as planned, I finished for him. I'm not doing anything until Monday. The wedding will happen. The perfect photos will be taken. The elegant farewells will be said. And then reality will set in. He stared at me, finally recognizing the steel beneath my calm exterior. What are you planning to do? I haven't decided yet, I said truthfully. Sell the house, perhaps, or charge you market-rate rent if you want to stay. Either way, I'll use the proceeds to rebuild what you took from me. You'd evict your own parents? Force your family into financial ruin over money? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. You mean exactly what you did to me? He stood abruptly, anger replacing shock. This is different. We used that money for family purposes. No, I corrected him. You used it for Jessica's purposes. I'm not family to you. I'm a resource to be used when convenient. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. Neither is stealing $780,000 from your injured daughter, yet here we are. I closed my laptop with a decisive click. The wedding proceeds as planned. We all play our roles, and on Monday, we deal with reality. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back with a calculated expression. You know your grandfather would be ashamed of you, using legal tricks to threaten your family. I laughed, genuinely amused by the attempt at manipulation. Grandpa saw through you years ago. Why do you think he put the house in my name instead of yours? Why do you think he left me the money directly? He knew exactly who you were. The truth of my words hit him visibly. Without another word, he left, sliding the partition closed behind him with unnecessary force. Alone again, I took a deep breath. The first confrontation was over, and I had stood my ground. There would be more to come. My mother's tears, Jessica's outrage, perhaps even attempts at reconciliation or bargaining. But the pattern was broken. I had taken my first real step toward independence. I reached for my phone and sent a text to my lawyer. Proceeding as planned. Thank you for your help. Then I began to get dressed for the day ahead, moving slowly but with purpose. Each item I placed in my duffel bag rather than unpacking into the den's small dresser was a statement. I wasn't staying. This wasn't my home anymore, if it ever had been. My future lay elsewhere, funded by the value of this house that had, unknowingly to my parents, been mine all along. As I heard the house begin to stir with wedding preparations, I felt strangely calm. The breaking had already happened. Now I was simply following through on what had been set in motion years ago. By my grandfather's foresight, by my parents' greed, by my own decision to finally put myself first. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. The rehearsal dinner passed. In a blur of expensive food, flowing champagne, and practiced smiles, I played my part flawlessly. The supportive sister, the dutiful daughter, the wounded veteran stoically enduring physical discomfort to be present for her family's celebration. Only my father's tight expression and occasional searching glance betrayed that anything was amiss. My mother, either genuinely oblivious or willfully ignoring my earlier conversation with my father, fluttered around the private dining room of the upscale restaurant, accepting compliments on her daughter's imminent marriage and the exquisite taste evident in every detail of the wedding plans. Jessica, half drunk on champagne and adoration, barely acknowledged my presence except for a mandatory sisterly hug when the photographer was nearby. Her future in-laws, the prestigious Whitmores, continued to treat me with the polite disinterest reserved for service staff and distant acquaintances. I observed it all with a strange detachment, as if watching actors in a play that no longer involved me. Tomorrow would be the wedding. Then Monday would bring reality crashing down on this carefully constructed facade. After the dinner, I declined the offer to join the younger crowd for after-party drinks. My leg was genuinely throbbing, and I needed to finalize my plans for what would come after Monday's legal filing. In the quiet of the den, well after midnight when the house had finally fallen silent, I opened my laptop and began systematically rebuilding my life. First, I researched apartment options in Pittsburgh, where a VA hospital with specialists in my type of injury was located. I made a short list of accessible units within my limited budget, assuming the house situation wouldn't resolve immediately. Next, I contacted my former commanding officer, who had offered to help with job connections when I was discharged. His response came quickly despite the late hour. "Sergeant Mitchell, good to hear from you. I have several contacts at defense contractors looking for veterans with your skills. Send me your resume, and I'll make introductions Monday morning." 1. By 1, I checked items off my mental list. Medical care, housing, employment, transportation. Each decision, each plan locked into place, felt like laying another brick in the foundation of my new life. As dawn approached, I finally closed my laptop and lay back on the uncomfortable sofa bed. For the first time since returning home, I felt a sense of control over my future. Not just anger at what had been taken, but purpose in what I was building. My parents and sister had systematically dismantled the safety net my grandfather had provided. Now I was systematically creating a new one, brick by brick, plan by plan. When I finally drifted off to sleep, it was with the certainty that while tomorrow would be difficult, the day after promised something better. Something that was truly mine. Morning brought chaos as expected. The house buzzed with activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, florists, coordinators, all focused on creating Jessica's perfect day. I remained in the den until absolutely necessary, emerging only when summoned for hair and makeup. "There you are." My mother's voice was tight with stress as she practically dragged me toward the dining room, now transformed into a beauty salon. "We've been waiting. Everyone else is already halfway done." The makeup artist studied my face with professional assessment. "Beautiful bone structure," she murmured. "We'll keep it simple and elegant to complement the bride." I sat silently as she worked, aware of my mother hovering nearby, clearly wanting to say something about my conversation with my father, but unwilling to create a scene in front of the beauty team. Jessica sat in the center of the room, holding court as 4 different professionals attended to her hair, nails, makeup, and last-minute dress adjustments. "Don't make her look too good," Jessica called over, laughing as if it were a joke. "It's my day to shine," the makeup artist faltered briefly, glancing between us. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "No one could outshine Jessica today." My sister beamed, missing the double edge to my words. My mother's expression remained troubled. The rose-gold sequined bridesmaid dress was as uncomfortable as it was impractical, especially with my leg brace. The seamstress had made adjustments to accommodate it, but the result was ungainly. I didn't care. None of this was about me, and by tomorrow, none of it would matter. The ceremony itself was as lavish as expected. Flowers everywhere, a string quartet, Jessica looking genuinely radiant as she processed down the aisle in the backyard to meet Brad. I stood with the other bridesmaids, supporting my weight on my good leg, smiling mechanically when the photographer turned in my direction. During the reception, I sat at my assigned table, picking at the gourmet meal and declining champagne in favor of water. My father made an emotional speech about family bonds and the importance of supporting each other through life's challenges. His eyes found mine as he spoke of sacrifice and loyalty, a silent plea that I pretended not to notice. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, I slipped away to the quiet of the kitchen, needing a moment away from the spectacle. One of the catering staff offered me a sympathetic smile. "Bridesmaid duties getting to be too much?" she asked. "Kindly. Something like that," I replied. "These big weddings can be overwhelming. I've worked hundreds, and sometimes I wonder if the couples realize that one perfect day costs them a year or more of financial struggle afterward." I thought of the $780,000 spent on this single weekend. Some people think it's worth any price, as long as someone else is paying. After the cake cutting, I made my excuses and returned to the den, changing out of the sequined dress into comfortable clothes. I packed my few belongings methodically, leaving out only what I'd need for the morning. My flight to Pittsburgh was booked for noon, long enough after the legal filing for me to see the initial reaction, but early enough to escape the full fallout. A soft knock on the partition interrupted my packing. My mother stood there, still in her mother-of-the-bride finery, her makeup smudged from crying. "Your father told me what you're planning," she said without preamble. "About the house." I continued folding a shirt, not looking up. "And? You can't do this to us, Ellie, not after everything we've done for you." The absurdity of her statement almost made me laugh. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Spent my inheritance? Converted my bedroom to wedding storage? Put me on a pull-out sofa? While I'm still recovering from combat injuries?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "We raised you. We supported you." "You used me," I corrected gently. "My whole life, you've treated me as the responsible one, the one who would understand, the one who would sacrifice. And when I was literally sacrificing my body for my country, you were stealing my future to fund Jessica's wedding extravaganza." "It wasn't like that," she protested weakly. "It was exactly like that." I zipped my duffel bag closed with finality. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I need to secure my own future, the one Grandpa tried to provide for me, and you took away." "We're your family," she said, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her expensive makeup further. "Family doesn't do what you did," I replied simply. "The legal paperwork will be filed tomorrow morning. After that, we can discuss terms if you and Dad want to stay in the house. Otherwise, I'll be listing it for sale." She stared at me, shock giving way to anger. "You've changed. The Army hardened you." "No," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "The Army taught me my worth. Grandpa tried to protect it, and now I'm finally claiming it. She left without another word, and I finished my preparations for departure. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, but tonight I slept more soundly than I had in months, perhaps years. The foundation of my new life was taking shape, built with my own hands, secured by my own determination. Whatever came next, I would face it standing on solid ground of my own making. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm I was about to unleash. I woke early, checked my phone, and found the confirmation email from my lawyer. Documents filed with the county recorder's office as of 8 a.m. Official notice will be delivered to the residence by courier at approximately 9:30 a.m. I dressed, carefully in the clothes I'd laid out the night before. Dark jeans that fit over my leg brace, a simple button-down shirt, comfortable shoes. Practical clothing for travel, for moving forward, for beginning again. The house was quiet as I made my way to the kitchen. The post-wedding exhaustion had everyone sleeping in, which suited my purposes perfectly. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, waiting. My suitcase and duffel bag were already by the front door, ready for my departure. At precisely 9:27 a.m., the doorbell rang. I answered it to find a courier with an official-looking envelope. "Delivery for Robert and Catherine Mitchell," he said, checking his digital tablet. "I'll sign for it," I replied, taking the stylus he offered. He handed me the envelope with a nod and departed. I closed the door quietly and returned to the kitchen, placing the sealed official notice in the center of the island where it couldn't be missed. Then I resumed my seat, sipping my coffee calmly as I heard movement upstairs, my parents stirring at last. My father appeared first, shuffling into the kitchen in his bathrobe, looking haggard. The celebration had clearly continued long after. I'd retired to the den. "Morning," he mumbled, heading directly for the coffee pot. He poured himself a cup before noticing the envelope on the counter. "What's that?" "It's for you and Mom," I said evenly. "From the county recorder's office." His hand froze halfway to the envelope, his eyes snapping to my face. "You actually did it." I said I would. His jaw tightened as he picked up the envelope, but didn't open it. "Your mother will be devastated." "I imagine so," I acknowledged. "Just as I was when I discovered you'd spent my entire inheritance on Jessica's wedding and your renovations." The sound of my mother's footsteps on the stairs prevented his response. She appeared in the doorway, also in her robe, her face puffy, from sleep and perhaps too much champagne. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between us, sensing the tension. My father silently handed her the envelope. She stared at it, uncomprehending. "Open it," he said quietly. She did, pulling out the formal legal documents inside. As she read, her expression changed from confusion to disbelief to anger. "What is this?" she demanded, looking up at me. "Some kind of joke?" "It's a formal notice that I'm exercising my rights as the legal owner of this property," I explained, calmly. "As of today, your conditional residency agreement has been terminated due to unauthorized modifications to the property." "This is our house," she practically shouted, throwing the papers down on the counter. "We've lived here for 20 years. "It hasn't been your house for the past 5, I corrected her. "Not since Grandpa saved you from foreclosure. He bought it outright and put it in my name, with conditions that you've now violated." "We're your parents," my father said, his voice strained with anger. "You can't just evict us from our home." "I'm not," I assured him. "Not immediately. The notice gives you 60 days to either vacate the property or enter into a formal rental agreement with me as the landlord. Market rate for this neighborhood is approximately $4,500 per month." My mother's face had gone white. "We can't afford that. You know we can't." "Yes," I agreed. Just as I couldn't afford to lose my entire inheritance, we all face difficult choices. Sometimes, "This is revenge," my father said flatly. "Pure and simple," I shook my head. No. This is me securing my future, the one Grandpa tried to provide and you stole. If I sell this house, I can replace most of what you took from me. I can pay for my surgeries, find accessible housing, build a new life. We're your family, my mother repeated, tears welling in her eyes. How can you do this to us? For the first time, I felt a genuine smile form on my lips. Not a happy one, perhaps, but an authentic expression of the clarity I'd finally achieved. That's the question, isn't it? How could you do what you did to me? The difference is, I'm acting within my legal rights to protect myself. You committed fraud to fund a party. The harsh truth of my words hung in the air between us. My mother began to sob, loud, ugly, performative tears that would have weakened my resolve just days ago. My father put his arm around her, glaring at me over her shaking shoulders. I hope you're satisfied, he spat. Breaking your mother's heart, destroying our lives, all for money. All for money, I repeated softly. Exactly what you did to me. The difference is, this was legally mine all along. I'm simply claiming what's rightfully mine, while you took what was never yours to take. I stood, checking my watch. My flight leaves in 2 hours. I've called a taxi. You have my lawyer's contact information if you want to discuss rental terms. You're leaving? Just like that? My mother's voice was incredulous through her tears. Just like that, I confirmed. Like I said before, I'm not doing this out of anger or revenge. I'm doing it because I need to build a new future, and this is the only resource I have left. Where will you go? My father asked, his voice suddenly uncertain, as if just realizing I had plans beyond this confrontation. Pittsburgh, I said. There's a VA hospital there specializing in my type of injury. I have job interviews lined up for next week. I'm moving forward. The doorbell rang again. My taxi. Right on time. That's my ride, I said, picking up my coffee mug and rinsing it in the sink, a small final courtesy. I'd say I'll be in touch, but I think my lawyer should handle communications from now on. As I turned to leave, my mother's voice, small and broken, stopped me momentarily. What about Jessica? She'll be devastated when she gets back from her honeymoon. I smiled sadly. I'm sure she'll understand that actions have consequences. After all, she benefited the most from yours. I walked out of the kitchen, collected my bags from the front door, and stepped outside into the bright morning sunshine. The taxi driver helped me load my luggage into the trunk, and I slid into the back seat without a backward glance at the house, my house, that had never truly been a home. As the car pulled away, I felt a profound shift inside myself. The anger that had fueled me was changing, transforming into something more sustaining. Determination, clarity, purpose. I wasn't defined by what they had done to me, or even by what I had done in response. I was defined by what I would build. Next, the taxi turned the corner and the family home disappeared from view. I didn't need to see it anymore to know its value, just as I didn't need my family's recognition to know my own worth. In reclaiming my inheritance, I had reclaimed something far more valuable: my power, my agency, my future. The inner transformation was complete. I was no longer the daughter who gave way, who understood, who sacrificed. I was the woman who stood her ground, who protected herself, who built her own path forward. And for the first time since coming home from Afghanistan, I felt genuine hope for what lay ahead. 3 weeks had passed since I'd left Columbus. My new apartment in Pittsburgh was small but functional, with the accessibility features I needed for my recovery. The VA hospital had already scheduled my first corrective surgery, and I had secured a promising position with a defense contractor that valued my military experience and was willing to accommodate my medical appointments. Life was taking shape, brick by steady brick. My lawyer had been handling all communications with my parents, keeping me informed of developments without requiring my direct involvement. They had responded with anger, then bargaining, then a reluctant acknowledgement of reality. The formal, Eviction process was underway, though they still had over a month before they needed to vacate the property. I was making peace with my decision, focusing on healing both physically and emotionally, when the unexpected text arrived. "It's Jessica. We need to talk. I'm in Pittsburgh." I stared at my phone, caught off guard. Jessica wasn't supposed to be back from her honeymoon for another week, and she certainly wasn't supposed to be in Pittsburgh. How had she even gotten my new number? As if reading my thoughts, another text appeared. "Mom gave me your number before you cut them off. I'm at the Marriott downtown, room 714. Please come." My first instinct was to ignore her, to maintain the clean break I'd established. But curiosity won out. What could she possibly have to say that couldn't be relayed through lawyers? And why? Come all this way instead of waiting for her return from Bali? I texted back, "I can be there at 4 p.m. Her response was immediate. "Thank you." The simple gratitude was so uncharacteristic of my sister that it heightened my wariness. This was likely a trap, an emotional ambush designed to make me relent on my decision about the house. Nevertheless, at precisely 4, I knocked on the door of room 714 at the downtown Marriott. My leg was aching from the taxi rides and walking through the hotel, but I stood straight, ready for whatever confrontation awaited me. The door opened to reveal Jessica, but not the polished, perfect sister I'd left behind 3 weeks ago. Jessica was pale, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face devoid of makeup. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, not her usual designer outfit. "Ellie," she said, her voice catching. "You came. You said we needed to talk," I replied neutrally, not moving to hug her or even enter the room yet. "Please, come in." She stepped back, gesturing to the standard hotel room behind her. No Brad in sight, I noticed immediately. I entered cautiously, choosing the desk chair rather than joining her on the edge of the bed. "Why are you in Pittsburgh, Jessica? Why aren't you in Bali?" She sank onto the bed, her shoulders slumping. "We cut the honeymoon short, Brad." She trailed off, staring at her hands. "Brad left 3 days after we arrived. He's filing for annulment." Of all the things I had expected her to say, this wasn't even on the list. "What happened?" Mom called while we were there. She was hysterical about the house, about what you'd done. She put me on speakerphone with her and Dad, and they told me everything. About Grandpa's inheritance, about how they'd used the money for my wedding, about the house actually being yours. I waited, saying nothing. This wasn't news to me, obviously, but I was interested in where she was going with it. "Brad overheard everything," Jessica continued, her voice hollow. "He was furious. Not at you, at them, and at me. He accused us of building our marriage on a lie, of stealing from you to create this illusion of wealth and status to impress his family." "Did you know?" I asked directly. "About my inheritance, about where the wedding money came from?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Not at first, not when they started planning, but about 6 months ago, Mom let it slip that they were using Ellie's fund for the venue deposit. I asked what that meant, and she told me Grandpa had left you money, but that since you were overseas and didn't need it right away, they were borrowing some for the wedding." "Some," I repeated flatly. "They took all but $12,000 of $780,000. Jessica's eyes widened. "I didn't know it was that much. Mom just said it was substantial and that they'd pay you back eventually." "And you were okay with that? With them taking my money without my knowledge or consent?" She looked down, shame finally crossing her face. "I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that you wouldn't mind, that it was still in the family, that you'd understand, because you always do." She looked up, tears filling her eyes. "I was selfish. I wanted the perfect wedding so badly, and it was easier to believe their excuses than to question where all the money was suddenly coming from." "And now?" I asked, unmoved by her tears. I'd seen too many of Jessica's performances over the years to trust her emotions at face value. "Now I've lost everything," she said bitterly. "My husband, my reputation with his family, my future. Brad's demanding all the gifts be returned. His parents are telling everyone the marriage was annulled because my family committed fraud." "Which we did," I pointed out. "I know that," she snapped, a flash of the old Jessica breaking through. Then she deflated again. "I know. I'm not blaming you. I'm here because I need your help." There it was, the real reason for her visit, her uncharacteristic humility, her apparent contrition. "What kind of help?" I asked warily. "Mom and Dad have nowhere to go when the eviction happens. Their credit is ruined from the near foreclosure 5 years ago. That's why Grandpa had to buy the house in the first place. They can't qualify for an apartment, and they've spent everything they had on the wedding." And I thought maybe you could let them stay, just until they figure something out. Or maybe we could work out a lower rent, something they could actually afford. She leaned forward, her expression pleading. "I know what they did was wrong. What we all did was wrong. But they're still our parents." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation beneath the sincerity. "Where will you live? Back with them?" She shook her head. "I'm moving to Chicago. My college roommate needs a subletter, and I've got a job interview at a marketing firm there next week. I'm trying to start over, away from all of this. So you're moving on, building a new life. But you want me to keep supporting the parents who stole from me." "Not forever," she said quickly. "Just until they can get back on their feet. Dad's business has been struggling since Brad's father pulled his accounts. Mom's talking about getting a job, but she hasn't worked in 20 years. I sat back in the chair, considering her request. Part of me, the old, accommodating Ellie, felt the familiar pull of family obligation, the ingrained response to fix problems, to make sacrifices, to put others first. But the new Ellie, the one forged in combat and strengthened by betrayal, recognized the pattern trying to reassert itself. Once again, I was being asked to give way, to understand, to be the responsible one while everyone else avoided consequences. "No," I said simply. Jessica blinked, clearly unprepared for such a direct refusal. "Ellie, please, no," I repeated firmly. "I won't stop the eviction, and I won't offer below-market rent. They made their choices knowing the potential consequences. Now they need to figure out their own solution." "But where will they go?" Her voice rose in panic. "That's not my problem," I said, surprised at how easily the words came, how right they felt. Just like my future wasn't their problem when they spent my inheritance. "They're our parents," she tried again. "And I was their daughter," I countered. "It didn't stop them from stealing from me. It didn't stop you from benefiting from that theft. Why should it stop me from enforcing my legal rights now?" She stared at me, the reality of my transformation finally sinking in. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." "So that's it? You're just going to throw them out on the street for revenge?" "It's not revenge, Jessica. It's consequences. And they won't be on the street unless they choose to be. They have options. They can downsize. They can move to a less expensive area. Dad can rebuild his business. Mom can get a job. They're not helpless victims. They're adults facing the results of their own actions." I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "I'm not doing this to punish them. I'm doing it because I need to secure my own future, the one they stole from me. The house is my only remaining asset, and I intend to use it to rebuild what I've lost." Jessica rose too, anger replacing her earlier contrition. "So much for family loyalty." I laughed, genuinely amused by her hypocrisy. "Loyalty works both ways, Jessica. They showed me none, and now they're experiencing the same in return. It's perfectly balanced when you think about it." "You'll regret this," she warned, the threat hollow in the face of my certainty. "No," I said with complete conviction. I won't. I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the knob. I wish you luck in Chicago. I hope you build a life that's truly yours, not one funded by someone else's sacrifice. Her expression flickered, a fleeting moment of genuine self-awareness crossing her face. I never meant to hurt you. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But you never thought about me at all, did you? That was the real problem. I left without waiting for her response, closing the door quietly behind me. In the elevator down to the lobby, I realized I was smiling. The unexpected challenge had come, the emotional appeal, the family guilt, the attempt to pull me back into old patterns, and I had met it with clarity and strength. The transformation was complete. The old Ellie would have given in, would have found a way to accommodate everyone else's needs at the expense of her own. The new Ellie stood firm in her boundaries, secure in her decisions, focused on her own rebuilding. As I stepped into the bright afternoon sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. Jessica's visit had been the final test, the last attempt of my old life to reclaim me. I had passed, not with anger or vengeance, but with calm certainty. My future was my own now, untethered from family expectations and obligations that flowed only one way. Whatever challenges came next, I would face them standing firmly on foundations of my own making. My phone rang as I was leaving my physical therapy appointment 6 weeks after my confrontation with Jessica. The screen displayed my lawyer's number. "Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to update you on the property situation," she said when I answered. "Your parents have vacated the house. The locksmith changed the locks this morning as instructed." I paused on the sidewalk, absorbing this information. Did they leave it in good condition? The preliminary inspection shows some minor damage, nothing beyond normal wear and tear. They took only personal belongings, leaving all fixtures and appliances as required in the eviction notice. "No last-minute drama?" I asked, genuinely surprised. None reported. The property management company said they were gone before the official deadline, left the keys in the mailbox. I thanked her and ended the call, feeling strangely hollow. I had expected resistance until the very end. Legal challenges, emotional appeals, perhaps even damage to the property out of spite. The quiet departure felt anticlimactic, almost disappointing. That evening, I received an email from my father. The subject line read simply, "Goodbye. Eleanor," it began formally. "We have complied with the legal requirements and vacated the property. Your mother and I have relocated to an apartment in Cincinnati, where I've found accounting work with a small firm. It's a significant step down in both prestige and income, but it will support us moderately well. Jessica has shared with us your refusal to reconsider the eviction. While we strongly disagree with your actions, we recognize that further communication is unwelcome. We have always thought of you as the responsible one, the one who understood family obligations. Perhaps that was our mistake, expecting more from you than from others. We hope someday you'll recognize that family should be more important than money or property. Until then, we will respect your wishes for distance. Dad." I read the email twice, noting the subtle manipulation even in what was ostensibly a farewell. The continued deflection of responsibility, the failure to acknowledge the original theft that had precipitated everything that followed. The positioning of me as the one who had failed to understand family obligations. I closed the email without responding. There was nothing to say. No point in arguing about who had failed whom, about whose understanding of family had been more flawed. We saw the situation through fundamentally different lenses, and no amount of explanation would bridge that gap. The real estate agent I'd hired had already listed the house, and initial interest was strong. The proceeds from the sale would replace much of what had been taken from me, allowing me to focus on my recovery without financial strain. That night, as I sat on my small balcony watching the Pittsburgh sunset, I felt the final piece of my old life fall away. The moment of truth had arrived and passed without fanfare. My parents had left, accepting at last that I would not yield, that the consequences of their actions were real and permanent. It wasn't victory I felt, nor satisfaction, just finality. The closing of one chapter, the opening of another entirely. Of my own writing. The house sold for $875,000 in a bidding war that surprised even my real estate agent. "The market in that neighborhood is hot right now," she explained during our final call. "You picked the perfect time to sell." Perfect timing. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's extensive renovations, funded with my stolen inheritance, had actually increased the property value significantly. Their theft had, in a roundabout way, maximized my return on the asset they didn't know I owned. After paying off legal fees, broker commissions, and setting aside money for taxes, I was left with just over $800,000, slightly more than the inheritance they had taken. The symmetry felt like a form of cosmic justice. The first thing I did was schedule the specialized surgery my VA benefits wouldn't fully cover. With proper medical care now financially accessible, my prognosis improved dramatically. The doctors believed I might eventually walk with only a slight limp, possibly without any assistive devices. The second decision was purchasing a small accessible condo near my new job. Nothing extravagant, but solidly built, with the modifications I needed and in a neighborhood that made my daily commute manageable. It was the first home I'd ever owned outright, the first space that was truly mine alone. I invested the remaining funds conservatively, creating the safety net my grandfather had intended, securing my future in concrete terms that couldn't be undermined by family manipulation or guilt. Life settled into a rhythm of work, recovery, and gradually building new connections in Pittsburgh. I joined a veterans support group, made workplace friends, even started dating occasionally. Normal life activities that had seemed impossible in those first dark days after discovering the theft. 3 months after the house sale, a small package arrived at my office. No return address, but the postmark was from Chicago. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a handwritten note. "Ellie, this is the first payment. It doesn't begin to cover what was taken from you, but it's a start. I got a decent marketing job and am putting aside a portion of each paycheck. We'll send more when I can. I'm sorry for my part in what happened." I was wrong, Jay. I stared at the check, unsure how to feel. It was a small fraction of what had been spent on her wedding, but it represented something my parents had never offered: acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a concrete attempt at restitution. After careful consideration, I deposited the check and sent a brief text to my sister's number. "Payment received. Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something adjacent to it, a recognition that perhaps one member of my family was capable of change, of seeing beyond her own immediate desires. The aftermath wasn't what I had expected. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional reconciliations, just quiet rebuilding on all sides. My parents in Cincinnati, Jessica in Chicago, me in Pittsburgh, all constructing new lives from the rubble of what had been destroyed. Sometimes aftermath isn't about resolution. Sometimes it's just about what remains after the explosion, what grows in the cleared ground. And sometimes what grows is stronger than what stood before. 5 years had passed since I'd revealed the truth about the house. 5 years of rebuilding, healing, and growth. My life in Pittsburgh had evolved from a hastily constructed escape plan into something solid and fulfilling. The defense contractor job had led to a promotion, then to a position managing their veterans outreach program. My work now focused on helping other wounded warriors transition to civilian careers, drawing on my own experience to guide others through their challenges. My medical journey had progressed remarkably well. 3 surgeries and countless physical therapy sessions had restored most of my mobility. The crutch was long gone, replaced occasionally by a sleek carbon fiber cane during particularly tiring days. Most people who met me now never suspected the extent of my previous injuries. My condo had become a true home, decorated thoughtfully with items that held meaning rather than just status. Artwork by veteran artists, photographs from my travels, comfortable furniture that welcomed rather than impressed. It was the antithesis of my parents' showcase home, reflecting substance over appearance. Over the years, Jessica had continued sending payments, irregular but persistent. She'd never missed more than 2 months in a row, and the total had grown to just over $65,000. Our communications remained minimal, usually just my brief acknowledgement of each deposit, but gradually evolved to include occasional updates about our lives. She was engaged again, to a teacher this time, rather than a wealthy businessman. She seemed happier in her photos, more genuine. My parents and I remained estranged. They had made no attempts to contact me after their farewell email, and I had initiated no reconciliation. The clean break had allowed all of us to move forward without the constant reopening of wounds. On a crisp October morning, exactly 5 years after the house sale, I walked through Point State Park, enjoying the vibrant fall colors reflected in the convergence of Pittsburgh's 3 rivers. My phone buzzed with an email notification, the quarterly statement from my investment account. The inheritance funds had grown steadily under careful management. Combined with my income and disciplined saving habits, my financial security was now greater than it would have been, even if my parents had never touched the original inheritance. Not simply recovered, but strengthened. As I stood watching the rivers merge into one powerful flow, I realized that time had transformed my story in unexpected ways. What had begun as devastating betrayal had ultimately launched me into a life more authentic and self-directed than what might have evolved without that painful catalyst. Time hadn't healed all wounds, but it had integrated them into the fabric of who I'd become, not defining me, but informing my choices, my boundaries, my values. The scars remained, but they no longer limited my movement through the world. I took a deep breath of the autumn air, feeling gratitude for where I stood now, for the journey that had brought me here, even for the harsh lessons that had forced me to claim my power. 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment of peaceful strength. The rivers flowed on, carrying the past away, nourishing the present, moving inexorably toward futures yet unseen. Last week, I received a wedding invitation from Jessica. A simple card, nothing extravagant, just elegant cream paper announcing her upcoming marriage to Michael, the teacher she'd been dating for 3 years. At the bottom, she'd handwritten, "I'd understand if you don't want to come, but it would mean everything if you did." 7 years after the betrayal that shattered our family, I sat in my sunlit kitchen contemplating her invitation. The anger that once consumed me had faded, replaced by something more nuanced. Not forgiveness exactly, but perspective. My grandfather's legacy hadn't been the money. It had been the foresight to protect me, to ensure I would eventually discover my own strength. The inheritance wasn't the $780,000 my parents stole, or the house they didn't know was mine. The true inheritance was the lesson that I could lose everything and still rebuild, that my worth wasn't tied to family approval, that boundaries weren't selfish but necessary. Sometimes the most valuable gift is the painful truth that sets you free. I picked up my phone and texted Jessica, "I'll be there." Small ceremony sounds perfect. The path forward isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply acknowledging that everyone is creating their own story, and you can choose which chapters you appear in. My parents? We still don't speak. Some bridges once burned aren't meant to be rebuilt. But that's okay. Not all relationships deserve continuation, especially those built on inequality and exploitation. The wisdom I gained wasn't about money or property or even family. It was about recognizing my own value and refusing to let anyone diminish it, even those who should have protected it most. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Claiming what's rightfully yours isn't greedy, it's justice. And building a life on your own terms isn't revenge, it's freedom. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. Every week, I share stories of courage, boundaries, and personal triumph that remind us all that we have the power to rewrite our own endings. Don't miss next week's story about a workplace betrayal that led to an unexpected new career. Subscribe. Now and remember, your story is still being written and you hold the pen.